how to remember everything like the Japanese students, and how you can too. You've been in that classroom before, the one where someone raises their hand and recites a historical timeline perfectly, dates and all. Or maybe you've watched a documentary about Japanese students memorizing thousands of kanji characters by middle school and thought, that's just not how my brain works. You've probably told yourself you're not good at remembering things, that your memory is average at best, that some people are just born with better recall and you drew the short straw. But what if the difference isn't about the brain you were born with? What if it's about something simpler, something you've been doing all along without realizing it, just in the wrong direction? Let's talk about what memory actually is, because most of us have been thinking about it backwards. We treat memory like a storage unit. You put information in, hope it stays there, and panic when you can't find it later. We think memorization is about repetition, about drilling something into your head until it sticks. And sure, that works to a degree, but it's exhausting, it's boring, and it doesn't explain why Japanese students can hold entire writing systems in their minds while many of us forget someone's name 30 seconds after hearing it. The stereotype goes like this. East Asian education is all rote memorization. Students sitting in rows, chanting facts, sacrificing understanding for recall. It's robotic, it's mechanical. And yes, there's some repetition involved in learning kanji or preparing for entrance exams, but that's not the secret. The secret isn't repetition, it's relationship. Here's what researchers discovered when they started studying how people in different cultures approach memory. They found that in many East Asian educational contexts, especially in Japan, students aren't just memorizing isolated facts, they're building elaborate mental frameworks where each piece of information connects to something else. A kanji character isn't just a shape, it's a story. It has radicals that hint at meaning. It appears in words you already know. It rhymes with concepts you've thought about. It lives in a web of associations that make it almost impossible to forget, because forgetting one thread still leaves you with 20 others to pull on. This approach has a name in cognitive psychology, elaborative encoding. It's the process of linking new information to existing knowledge in meaningful ways. And it turns out, this is how human memory actually wants to work. We're not computers. We don't save files in neat folders. We remember through connection, through emotion, through narrative. When you remember something deeply, you're not storing it. You're weaving it into the fabric of everything else you know. Think about your own life for a moment. You probably remember where you were on certain significant days, not because you drilled the date into your head, but because the day meant something. It connected to your fears, your joys, your identity. That's not a special kind of memory, that's just memory working the way it's designed to. The Japanese students who seem to have superhuman recall aren't doing something alien. They're doing what you already do naturally, but they're doing it intentionally with the information they want to keep. There's a French philosopher, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who wrote about how we understand the world through embodied experience. He said we don't just think about things abstractly. We know them through how they feel, how they move, how they relate to us. Memory works the same way. You don't remember a fact. You remember the shape of the question it answered, the surprise you felt when you learned it, the way it changed how you saw something else. The Japanese writing system, for all its complexity, is actually designed for this. Every character is a puzzle with clues. Learning isn't memorization, it's detective work. This is where Western education often stumbles. We separate subjects into silos. Math has nothing to do with history. Science doesn't touch art. We hand students isolated facts and expect them to stick. But the brain doesn't think in categories. It thinks in connections. When you're told to memorize the capital of a country, that's a lonely piece of information. When you learn about the geography that shaped that city, the history of why it became the capital, the way its name sounds in the local language, suddenly you have a dozen hooks to hang that memory on. It's no longer something you have to remember. It's something you couldn't forget if you tried. And here's the part that might sting a little. You already know how to do this. When you're learning about something that genuinely interests you, whether it's a hobby, a TV show, a relationship, you naturally build these connections. You remember details without effort because you're curious, you ask questions, you notice patterns.
You don't sit down and say, I'm going to memorize everything about this topic. You just pay attention and the memory follows. The difference with Japanese students isn't talent, it's structure. They've been taught from an early on to look for patterns, to connect radicals in kanji, to see how words relate to each other. It becomes a habit. And the beautiful thing about habits is that they can be built at any age. There's a concept in neuroscience called neuroplasticity. Your brain doesn't stop learning. It doesn't close shop at 25 and refuse new tenants. It remains flexible, capable of forming new connections throughout your entire life. The reason you might struggle to remember things now isn't because your memory is broken. It's because you've been using a technique that fights against how memory naturally works. So, what does this look like in practice? It's simpler than you think, though it requires a shift in perspective. When you encounter something you want to remember, don't just repeat it. Ask yourself, what does this remind me of? How is this similar to something I already know? Why does this matter? What would change if this weren't true? You're not trying to memorize, you're trying to understand. And understanding, it turns out, is what makes information unforgettable. Let's say you're learning a new word in a foreign language. The traditional approach is to repeat it over and over, maybe write it down a few times. That might work for a vocabulary quiz tomorrow, but it won't survive the week. The elaborative approach asks different questions. Does this word sound like anything in your native language? Does it share roots with other words you know? Can you imagine a scenario where you'd use it? Can you connect it to a memory, even a silly one? Suddenly, you're not memorizing a word, you're adding a thread to a tapestry. This is what Japanese students do with kanji, often without even realizing it. They're not superhuman, they're not grinding harder, they're working with their memory instead of against it. And here's the quiet truth that nobody wants to say out loud. You probably already do this with the things you care about. You remember song lyrics because they connect to emotions. You remember movie plots because they tell stories. You remember jokes because they surprise you. You don't have a bad memory, you have an underengaged memory. You've been asking it to store when you should be asking it to connect. There's something deeply validating about realizing this. You're not broken, you're not lazy, you're not inherently worse at remembering than someone else. You've just been using a tool the wrong way, because that's how you were taught, and now you know better. The writer Jorge Luis Borges once created a character who remembered everything perfectly, every detail of every moment. It sounds like a gift, but Borges wrote it as a curse. The character couldn't think because he couldn't forget. He was drowning in information with no way to organize it, no way to see what mattered. Real memory isn't about storing everything, it's about connecting what's meaningful. That's what elaborative encoding gives you. Not a photographic memory, not a perfect recall of every trivial detail, but a deep, rich understanding that makes the important things unforgettable. It's quieter than what we think of when we imagine genius. It doesn't look impressive from the outside, but it's powerful, it's sustainable, and it's available to anyone willing to shift from drilling to wondering. So, maybe you're not bad at remembering. Maybe you've just been remembering the wrong way. Maybe the difference between you and those students you envied isn't ability, it's approach. And approach, unlike ability, is something you can change starting today. The next time you need to remember something, don't fight your brain. Work with it. Ask questions. Find connections. Build meaning. Let your memory be what it wants to be. Not a filing cabinet, but a web. Not a vault, but a conversation. That's how you remember everything. Not by forcing it in, by letting it belong. If you're curious about how this applies to specific areas of learning or how to build these connection habits into your daily life, the next videos will walk through exactly that, not as tricks or hacks, but as natural extensions of how your mind already works when you let it.